Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and today you're meeting our newest sponsor, Kaleidoscope Adventures. In this conversation, you'll get to know Keith Kelly and Brian Clissold, two of their tour creators and awesome human beings. They're really fun to talk to. We're going to talk about why touring, what does it involve, how does it work, why choose Kaleidoscope, and in the end, why are they choosing to sponsor this podcast? And it's really interesting. Through the conversation, you get to know Brian and Keith, which is important because those are the people that you would be working with as you plan your tours. But you also get ideas for how mission-focused touring can really catapult your singers and your organizations to the next level. I really enjoyed this conversation. I love talking to the people over at KA Tours. And if you stay tuned to the end, I'll give you a little teaser surprise. So without further ado, this episode brought to you by our newest sponsor, Kaleidoscope Adventures, as we talk about all things touring with Brian Clissold and Keith Kelly. Today on the Music Ed Matters podcast, we are introducing you to our new sponsor. Hello, Kaleidoscope Adventures.
Hello. Hi, Emmy.
So on the camera right now, which you can't see, but you can hear, or you can check it out on YouTube, we have Keith Kelly and Brian Clissold. Hey, guys.
Hi. Great to see you.
It's so good to do this. Tell the listener, what are your roles with Kaleidoscope?
Oh, Keith is gesturing for me to go first. I will go first.
This is Brian speaking.
This is Brian speaking. Yes. I am a senior tour consultant with Kaleidoscope Adventures, which basically means that I work with conductors to design and organize their performance travel. Their performance travel. So we decide what they're going to accomplish, what they want to accomplish with the tour, and we work together to create a really creative, exciting, fulfilling, and meaningful trip for their ensemble.
What is the coolest place you've ever been?
The coolest place I've ever been? Probably Italy.
Okay.
Italy's mighty nice. Yes.
And do you have any like flashbulb moment of a tour that just really stands out that makes that special?
Yeah. And you know what? It's usually the quiet moments. It's not the big performances. It's not we performed in the Vatican, which was amazing and life-changing. But the moments that really stand out are the moments of real community with the ensemble, with the locals, a brief conversation after a concert in a tiny church in a village, things like that really make the experience so unique and so special and that you can't have anywhere else.
I love it. Thanks for sharing, Brian. All right, Keith, your turn.
Well, yeah, I'm a senior tour consultant with Kaleidoscope Adventures as well. The difference, as you can probably tell from the accent, you don't need video to tell, is that I'm their international guy. I'm based in Galway, Ireland.
You don't look Irish.
I don't look Irish. I've got a tan and I have black hair. But yeah, so I'm based on the west coast of Ireland, and I've been working with marching bands coming to Ireland for St. Patrick's Day for years, and that's when I met the team from Kaleidoscope Adventures, and now I have the opportunity to bring groups all around the world and all across the US as well. So it's an exciting time, and it's we're both myself and Brian are actually quite new to the company, and that's I think that's a real testament to the company as well, that they've been so innovative and so progressive during a time that has been difficult for both music education, of course, but for travel has been incredibly difficult. It's been pretty much non-existent for some time. And it's now that we're looking at 2022 and we've done so much work over the last 2 years to position ourselves to be ready for the next year and beyond.
So we'll talk about some of those innovations and what attracted both of you guys to Kaleidoscope Adventures in a moment. But Keith, what's your favorite place to go on tour?
So, I mean, of course, I'm from Ireland, so I'm going to be.
I was
always
hoping you were
biased
going to
with,
say Ireland, because I'm really excited about that.
Well, yeah, and you've been to Ireland before, Emmy. So, I mean, you know what's there. But I'm going to say something else. I'm going to say Indianapolis for DCI finals right now at the moment. I do a lot of work with DCI, and DCI finals. It's like the pinnacle of the art form, and so to be able to go there every year, and to be able to bring groups there every year, and for them to experience sometimes drum corps for the first time if they're an international group, that's an amazing experience, for someone like me who's a marching band guy, it's pretty special.
I'll just interject that DCI stands for Drum Corps International, for those choral nerds out there.
Thanks. I was guessing it. I was sitting over here thinking DC does drum corps. Okay, it took me a second, but thanks for the translation over here. I love Indy. My whole mom's side of the family lives in Indianapolis, so we've been going there for as long as I can remember. All the memories. There's so many fun non-musical things to do there as well. Do you guys get to go do some of those really cool tours and stuff?
It depends on the group. It depends how long they come in for. That week of events is so packed that if they're coming in on the Wednesday, they're going to be busy Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and some probably going home on the Sunday. But a lot of groups come in earlier, and we bring them to the race circuit there, and we bring them to the zoo, and they do performances around the city as well. So really depending on the group and how long they're coming in for. Some groups want to come in and they just want to perform the entire time. That's what they're there for, you know. But yeah, we've definitely done a lot of the fun things, the fun musical, non-musical things as well.
I love how you're just in sharing your stories, saying so much about the individuality of a tour. Every group's why for going on tour is different. We'll talk about that more in a second too, but I want to know how each of you got into this current role. So let's start with Brian. How did you become a tour person?
Yeah, gosh. How long is this podcast supposed to be? I've been a musician all my life, and always loved the travel element of music. And I have been very fortunate that even in high school, my dad was my high school choral director, and he always took the choir on tour every other year. So I started young with travel, and it's such an honor to take children's choirs on tours because they're getting that seed planted very early. And, my background is music. My degrees are in music, but throughout my career, I've always really loved every facet of travel, not just the experience itself, but planning for it, the creative process, which really speaks to the artist in me, and not just doing, we're going here, so we have to do this. Well, we're going here. Let's really research and see what unique opportunities there are that maybe it's Washington, D.C., and my ensemble has been there before. So what can we do that's different, like sing in the Cathedral Basilica rather than, something else. So that has driven me forward throughout, and opportunities. I've just been very fortunate to connect with a lot of people through my career, and there was a great opportunity to join the Kaleidoscope team last spring, and I jumped at it.
I love it. I love how it's so centered on the creativity and individualness and the experiences and how that shapes individual lives, even though it's kind of like together but yet individual, which is so cool. Thanks for sharing, Brian.
Well,
Keith, what
pleasure.
about you? How did you get into all this?
Well, like Brian, I'm a music guy. Originally, I was 12 years as a military musician in Ireland, and when I finished that, I started managing a school of music up in Dublin, which is home to quite a famous marching band in Ireland, at least anyway, the Artane band. And that band room, it's actually the band that I grew up in as well, so it was lovely to go back there and be the administrator for that organization. But it's right beside Dublin Airport, so when we have all of these visiting marching bands, orchestras, choirs, a lot of choirs we've hosted over the years too, many of them would stop in Artane either at the beginning of their itinerary for an exchange concert or at the end of their itinerary. So I was hosting a lot of international groups and getting to know a lot of the international tour operators, Irish tour operators too. And it just became something that I became very passionate about. In fact, I started dictating a little bit to the tour operators how to organize their day when they came here, because a lot of times, there are tour operators out there that do amazing work, but they want to try to fit as much onto an itinerary as possible, really ticking all the boxes, making sure to, see every landmark, meet every person they possibly can. And for me, less was more. I wanted to give a significant amount of time for the exchange with my band and my kids. And that was for two reasons. Number one, my kids wanted more time with the visitors. But secondly, I knew that the visitors wanted more time with my kids too. And maybe it meant that they would miss a particular attraction in Dublin that day, but they would have a better exchange opportunity with my kids. And potentially they'd exchange Instagram, accounts. And connect with people for longer than maybe a quick performance and run and gun, So that really opened my eyes to it, sort of a new world of creative opportunities for groups. And I was able to bring my own band on a lot of tours then during that time as well. So that's what got me into the industry. And then working with St. Patrick's Festival, bringing groups in then as well, was the next step to that.
So both of you had lots of experience traveling, organizing, taking people places, having people come to you. I feel you on when tour operators make plans. I live in Savannah, Georgia. It's beautiful. Tons of tourists all year long. There is no dead tourist season. And sometimes you're like watching them thinking, you're doing what in one day? But I love how both of you talked about the human connection element. And Brian, at the beginning, you talked about that moment of quiet being one of your favorite memories. Let's talk about some innovations, because it sounds like both of you have some really creative ideas. Why Kaleidoscope Adventures?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there are so many tour operators and so many really good ones. And we have a lot of respect for our colleagues throughout the industry. Two reasons in my mind, and I think it's different for each of us, but two reasons in my mind. One is that truly custom aspect, that we really listen to whomever the contact is for the tour, whether it's a conductor or a teacher. We really do listen and take the time to pay attention to not only what they think they want, but reading between the lines. They may say they're going to this destination for this, but we take the time to get to know the director, to understand their priorities for their ensemble, which then translates to the priorities of their trip. And in the case of an independent group, like a community band or a community choir, children's choir, I really personally pay attention to the mission statement. Is your trip going to reflect what your mission is? Is it going to be mission-minded? And then the other is unparalleled service. I have worked with a lot of tour companies in various capacities throughout my career, as a director, as a person in other sides of this industry. And the service that Kaleidoscope provides is just really unbelievable. Silly things like making sure there are enough towels in the hotel, in each hotel room before a group arrives. You got 4 people staying in a room. Well, a lot of hotels don't put 4 sets of towels in the room. I mean, things like that hopefully the director never thinks of, and it never will think of on a Kaleidoscope tour, because it's just done. But it becomes a real issue if you're checking in with 2 bus loads of kids and nobody has enough towels.
Right. Oh, it's something I never thought about, but that is unmatched service. That's important. I love this. So you're talking about mission-minded touring and the service element. Keith, what attracted you to KA?
So one of the things that came out really of the pandemic was a new type of work. And regardless of whether you're in music education, travel, or many other industries, you can probably agree with that statement. The fact that I live in Galway and I work for a company that's based in Orlando. By the way, we're both in Orlando together.
I know, it's so cool to see both of you in one really screen.
Cool. We hadn't met until Monday.
Right. You hadn't met face to face until Monday? No. How long have you been working together?
Almost a year now.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Man.
But that's the innovation that we're talking about. And the travel industry in particular relies, a good tour operator needs to have knowledge. And that's really what you're asking for when you start working with a tour operator. They need to know the locale. They need to know the destinations. And we now have moved to a point in the workplace across many different industries where it's not necessary to have people all in one office. And so the fact that I'm here in Ireland means that we have a local knowledge in Ireland and the UK that other US tour operators just wouldn't have, even if they have traveled to Ireland and the UK many times. The fact that I'm based in Ireland just means that I have local knowledge of destinations, local knowledge of exchange groups, and real relationships with directors and music schools. So when a group comes to one of the destinations that I'm looking after, we're able to create those real opportunities that I was talking about earlier on, because these people are working with me regularly. So I think local knowledge is incredibly important. And I think the forethought to see that that's where the industry was going, and that goes across many, many different things that Kaleidoscope Adventures have done. We've had the opportunity to sit back and reflect over the last 2 years and see, okay, where is the travel industry going to be in 2030? Let's start getting ahead of those changes now. That could be from new systems that we're developing in order to make group travel much, much easier and more efficient. Or, as I say, it could be hiring someone that's based in Ireland to be able to provide better international tours and better knowledge when we're planning those tours as well. So I think the last 2 years have really, I think anyone that has had the opportunity to sit back and reflect over the last 2 years, there's been an opportunity for change. And the fact that Kaleidoscope Adventures was able to embrace that change, I think, is a testament to the company.
So let's talk about some of these things with tour, because I want to, through this conversation, answer why do we travel, how do we travel, when do we travel, all those questions. But let's talk about it from someone who has either traveled before or hasn't. What are some of the things that are changing in the industry, or what are some of the things that you feel are important to know as we have this conversation today?
Yeah, well, one of the assets that you get when you're working with a tour operator such as Kaleidoscope is that you have somebody who's plugged into the travel industry 24/7, and you, as a music teacher, that's not what your job is. And there are many teachers who pride themselves and do a fantastic job of keeping up with what's going on so that they can take their group on a tour. Absolutely. But it's still not their primary job, nor should it be. They don't teach you that in music school, nor should they really. I know, I was there. But you're really investing in expertise. And we just got another email today from one of our suppliers today that something else has changed. So the key to the immediate future of travel right now is flexibility. Mm-hmm. Everything is changing, quite literally on a daily and hourly basis. Everything is changing. Everything from COVID requirements at various destinations and venues to travel restrictions or travel requirements. To changes in systems. Disney has announced a new reservation system. Disney has announced a new food reservation system. So there are all kinds of things that are happening, and many of them are very, very complicated. It should not be your job as a music teacher to have to decipher all of that. That's what we're here for. That's our job. That's our expertise. And quite frankly, that's what we get paid to do, is to make that so that you, as the teacher, can plan a trip with ease and focus on what's really important for you, and let the how be taken care of by the experts.
Well said. Well said. Those are all things that make me anxious when I think about traveling with a bunch of young people, especially, or even when you're traveling with older people that might need extra accommodations. Knowing that I can focus solely on the music and the people, it makes working with a tour operator just worth every penny. Were you going to add something?
Keith knows exactly what venues in Dublin he can take an adult group with mobility issues to, mm-hmm. And which ones he can't. Mm-hmm. Things like that are really, really important that you shouldn't have to find out on your own.
Directors should be able to enjoy and experience the tour that they're having too, and focus on allowing the kids or the band members, if it's an adult group, to or choir members, of course, to really have the best programming and musical experience that they can. That should be the director's main goal. Myself and Brian, obviously, we come from musical backgrounds. And I think when we're designing tours with the director, I think the programming and the artistic vision is a big part of what we do too. I think both of us actually agree with that. And that might mean that, when designing the actual program, the musical content of the tour, that maybe we're looking at attractions that might fit in with that theme, might be more appropriate. Some venues in Ireland, depending on the church that you may be going to, may have certain requirements in terms of programming. And no matter where you go, I suppose in Europe, you're going to have those sort of requirements. We're there to help with that sort of information and help you with your artistic vision for the tour as well. And I think that's something that's changed actually a little bit in travel, even during the time that I've been there, is that there is more of a focus on the artistic merit and the educational merit of the tour. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we have a lot of experience with. We work with so many different educators and so many different directors that we've seen what works and what doesn't work.
So when a teacher is thinking like what works, what doesn't work, they're trusting in you, what are the steps? Like, when does someone get started thinking about travel? How do they make travel happen? How do you work with different size budgets? Give us like the play-by-play.
Sure. You can start anytime. You can start planning anytime. The more time that you allow yourself, the better. But we're having this conversation in early December, and we are still working with groups that are planning travel for this coming spring, and that's okay. And we will be the first ones to say, you know what, maybe you want to hold this trip off until next year. We just don't have enough time to plan this thoroughly for you. But the first step is kind of, for lack of a better term, a little bit of a brain purge. Some directors have a very clear idea of where they want to go in a given year, or maybe they have a standard rotation. But also just to be open, to have the initial conversation with Keith or myself or one of our colleagues about maybe not where, but why. Why are you touring, and what do you hope to accomplish? And maybe this year it's a regional year because of all the travel uncertainty, and you need flexibility. So maybe you don't want to deal with airplanes, you'd rather deal with motor coaches. That's great. So let's talk through that, and what is regional to you. How long do you want the trip to be? What's the age of your ensemble? How many performances do you want to do? Are you considering a music festival? And then really, I worked with a director recently who said, I want to travel, but I'm not sure where. And this director was based in California. And so we talked about I think a half dozen different destinations in our first conversation. And we narrowed it down to 2, Pacific Northwest versus Chicago. And then I took that and worked with that and just came up with just kind of a shell of an itinerary for each location. Said, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? You have musical contacts in each location. I have musical contacts in each location. Let's work together. And we've eventually landed on Chicago, and we have some great opportunities coming for them. But it started with that initial, very organic conversation of what we want to accomplish and where some of our musical contacts were. Like I said, more time is always easier, both for the planning stage, but also for the participants on the trip. Fundraising, paying for it, just planning your lives around it, working around family vacations and things like that. The more time that you have to allow for that, the better. But we can really start that conversation at any time, and you can travel at any time. There are certain peak times of the year that can be good for travel, like spring break trips. However, they're very busy times. So if you can take your group in June or July, or if you can do fall travel, there are really some great opportunities in the fall that you just can't have in March or April.
I think that's right. I think that open-mindedness is incredibly important, and something that you should feel more comfortable with when you work with a tour operator. For people that, and as Brian has said, there's directors out there that are very proud of the tours that they've been able to put together. Some of them go into tourism eventually themselves as well. But it's very easy to fall back into what has worked in the past for our school. And so you end up on this rotation. Tour operators are researching constantly. It's a huge part of our job, is researching and gaining knowledge and making connections and keeping those connections and networks updated as well. So, you may have traveled to Washington, D.C., you may have traveled to Disney every 2 to 3 years for the past number of years, but approaching Kaleidoscope Adventures and being open about, okay, as Brian says, what is the actual goal? What is the educational goal here? What is the performance goal? We may be able to provide destinations that you've never considered in the past. Maybe that is an international destination. Maybe it's a lot easier to go to an international destination that you've ever taught. And, I've been able to surprise my own team who work in travel with some of the rates and some of the pricing that's available in Ireland and the UK as well. So, this may be something that we may surprise you with the options that are really there for you and your group.
So it's kind of like testing the water, going and trying on a bunch of different outfits and seeing which one's going to be your concert attire and making sure that it fits the best and makes you feel your most confident. Only
Absolutely.
You're going somewhere.
That's it.
But you'll need a concert attire for that too.
You'll need concert attire. So
Very good. Very good to know. Okay, so if that's how we get started and that's how we go, what's the difference between traveling around a festival or just going on an individual tour? How do those work? And do you put together the festivals or do you plan stuff around other festivals? How does that work?
For the most part, we don't do festivals. Kaleidoscope is not a festival company. And we work with quite a few different festival companies. There are many that I'm sure your listeners are aware of. Instrumental and choral festivals, DCI is one of them, Drum Corps International, but we work with companies that produce festivals across the world. We also work with them domestically, New York City, Washington, D.C. And generally speaking, we're able to build the festival into your trip. So we work with the festival company to find out when the rehearsals are, when the performances are, what all the requirements are, and then we take care of everything else. Usually that means we take care of your transportation, meals, lodging, and any other attractions. So if you're going to New York City, for example, we'll take care of booking your Broadway show and work with that. Maybe the festival is 3 days long, but you want a 5-day tour. So we're going to work with you to plan the itinerary for that additional time. So there are ways to work with the festival company, and we are happy to stay out of their way. We're happy to take your group to the stage door and say, have a great time, and let the experts in production take care of the rest of it. Just, we'll meet you at the end. And we let them take over.
I think because we're working with so many festivals and so many groups that we've gone through this process quite a number of times. So maybe there's an application process to go through. Well, we may have gone through that application process 20, 30 times with different groups. We can really streamline it and we can get most of the work done without adding extra work for the director as well. And maybe, as Brian says, we can build a tour around a festival. A lot of groups do come to us with a festival in mind first, but then we can build something to the artistic merit of a tour, as we talked about earlier on. We can build something else around that. For an example, in Dublin, we can have a group perform in St. Patrick's Cathedral before or after performing at the St. Patrick's Festival. We can bring them to another smaller parade that might keep them busier in the evening after they've performed at the bigger and larger parade in Dublin. So there's a lot that we can do because we have experience of working with the festivals to make the tour, which is the bigger aspect of this, much more effective, a better experience, and easier to plan to.
I love it. These are great ideas and great options. I have a tough question for you. So what do you do to convince families and communities and singers to travel? How are you letting them know that it is safe to do so? How are you getting them on board with the financial commitment? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, first of all, we have an unparalleled safety record. And we are also a very transparent company. If you go to our website, there's a frequently asked questions page that talks about our refund policy, the cancel for any reason insurance that is available, our safety record, all those what if questions that, and I'm a parent too, and my kid has traveled with a music group, so I see this from multiple lenses. Of course, this is your child or this is yourself, and safety is the utmost concern. Again, we're the experts. We are on top of all of the safety considerations 24/7 in the industry. We have a program at Kaleidoscope called KA Safe. that is a certification program with our vendors that they have to demonstrate what their safety protocols are before they can receive that designation from us. We have a whole list of vendors that we will only work with because they have passed through those hurdles. They've proven to us that they are keeping safety as their number one priority, whether that's a motor coach company or a hotel or a certain venue or a festival company. We really take that very, very seriously. And quite honestly, we wouldn't be sitting here today on this end of the pandemic had it not been for that transparency and for the integrity of the company and the safety record of the company. We would not, Keith and I would not be here, and the company would not be here. Mm-hmm. We've been in business now for 28 years, I believe, with an unparalleled record. Wow. So we are, we just have such a great safety record and such great reviews and referrals and all of that. You can trust that you're going to have a safe and enjoyable and life-changing experience with us.
I think to your question about costs, Emmy, we have an excellent online system where people are able to register, create their own accounts, and pay over a period of time through installments as well. That's something that has been great for directors because they don't have to collect money. We're able to manage all of that for them. That's one of the most stressful parts about organizing any tour is managing money. Directors won't have to do that when they work with Kaleidoscope Adventures. And it does make that process of getting on that tour a lot easier as well, because it gives you that opportunity to pay in installments. And again, to an earlier point that you made as well, Emmy, about when should directors get in touch with us? When should they start planning? Well, the earlier that you do, the more installments, the easier it is that we're able to break that down over a period of time too. So I think, that's how the why in terms of cost, I think, is important then as well, because it is a big ask. Some groups may travel every 2 years. Some groups may do international touring every 4 years potentially. And why is it that music performance is so tied with travel? I think it's a really important question that we need to ask ourselves. And I think it's because performance has that international aspect to it. No matter where you go in the world, that understanding of performance, that exchange of artistic performance is incredibly important. We don't perform, or we don't practice, or we don't learn about music in order just to perform to ourselves. We do it so that we can bring that music to our communities, but also to the world as well. And since the beginning of choirs in schools, since the beginning of bands in schools, that has been fundamental. And it's not just American groups, international groups travel regularly. It's a destination for them to work towards. You'll find out a lot of music programs. It's the pinnacle of a particular generation when they tour. That has been what they've been working towards for 3-4 years before maybe a large graduation or students or members moving on for whatever reason. So the tour gives a focus towards that learning that's so important in our programs.
I love that you said that. That's one of the things I write about in my book that's about to come out. I spend a whole section writing on what's the nugget, what keeps them coming back.
Right.
You have your week-to-week rehearsal, but what's the long-term goal? What's the measurement? And it'll be different. And
it may be a case where many of the students, their main reason for being in that program is that international tour. I can only speak for myself. I'm not sure if you guys can agree with me on this, but I remember being 14 years of age in the Artane Boys Band, as it was in Dublin at that time. And music was fun, but it certainly wasn't the main reason I was in there. My friends were there, and there was an international tour coming up. They were going to the US for St. Patrick's Day in New York in 1998, and that kept me going. During times where music was maybe the third or fourth most important reason why I was in the band at that stage. But over that time, I was able to mature and start appreciating the music more. And I think the international tour was a huge part of keeping a lot of the kids there until they could then appreciate the music a little bit more. I'm almost certain that that's the case with so many music programs anywhere in the world. So, you know, having that nugget, as you say, why join our program? Well, it's that international or that national tour that we're going to be working towards.
Right, that location. I know that for me, it's the memories. I call them flash bulbs because the old picture that you would take that would ingrain the light image in your face, in your eyes when you close your eyes. I just think about all the flash bulb memories I have of taking middle schoolers overseas. And yes, we toured regionally and we toured locally a lot, but the life-changing moments that happened overseas with what you just said, Keith, was so perfect, that music performance is understood throughout the world. That's something everyone enjoys. You know what else people really enjoy? And we have to wrap up with this question. People like podcasts. That's why they're listening.
I do.
I love podcasts. I listen to a ton. Keith, you have a podcast.
I do.
What's your podcast
do. That's
called?
what got me into it. You know, that's one of the reasons I started working with Kaleidoscope that I should have probably mentioned earlier on. Kaleidoscope were my first sponsors as well, with the Global Band Room podcast.
The Global Band Room podcast. I've listened to about half a dozen episodes, and I've assigned 3 of them to my secondary methods course in the spring. We'll talk about that another time. But I want to ask, why are
I'm
you...
very honored.
Well, you're very good at hosting episodes. Why are you sponsoring a podcast? What are you hoping to get out of this? What's the relationship that we're going to build here?
Yeah, I might take that, Emmy. I think one of the reasons that we travel, as I mentioned earlier on, is to create connections. And I think podcasts do that in a way that maybe traditional media hasn't. I love, there's a meme, if anyone has seen it, where there's what it feels like to listen to a podcast. And it's 4 or 5 people on a poster having fun and having a great time. And then there's one person looking at that poster and laughing with them. And I just love that meme because it's exactly what it's like to listen to podcasts. Traditional media, traditional radio is much more formal, and the hosts are much more formal, whereas podcasts at their best should feel like everyone is sitting in the same room having a great time, and it transports the listener to that place as well. So when we say travel is all about creating connections in a physical space, podcasts do that in a digital space and an online space. And so we want to create those connections. We want to create connections between band directors and podcasters and the listeners, who sometimes are performers or they're directors themselves. And then when they're ready to take the next step and create those real life opportunities and real life exchanges, Kaleidoscope Adventures is the perfect person to come to, because we understand that's what we've been trying to do since the beginning. My podcast, as you mentioned, is called The Global Band Room, and the focus of that is to reflect and review banding across the world, not just in the US. I think my last review of this with DCI, I think there's like 17,000 high school and US college bands here in the US, but there's equally as many, if not more, across the rest of the world as well. And it all looks a little bit different. There's a different flavor no matter where you are in the world. But then there's a huge amount of similarities then as well, because music, as we said earlier on, is so similar. So there's so many reasons to create connections. The podcasts allow us to do that in a way that you might just spark an idea that, oh, I'd love to go and meet that band, or I'd love to perform at that venue the podcast is talking about. So it's just a natural first step for us.
Well, I'm really excited to be a part of the community and to see what relationships and community and conversations we have thanks to all of your help. I have the website mykatrip.com in the episode notes. If the listeners want to reach out to you guys individually, what's the best way to find y'all?
Our emails are very simple. Mine is brian@mykatrip.com.
Mine is not so simple. It's Kelly@mykatrip.com. But you can find me everywhere at Global Band Room as well. And you'll be able to find all my links and podcasts, which eventually come back to Kaleidoscope Adventures as well.
And we'll have you back on the show, and we'll do a collaboration episode, just the two of us. Brian, you're awesome. You'll always come back on the podcast, but we have to do a global
takeover,
global band room swapperoo. That'd be so much fun. This was
awesome.
A really great conversation. I feel excited that travel is back, and that we really can have mission-minded travel and create experiences that are absolutely mind-blowing and life-changing. Thank you guys for doing this, and thanks for sponsoring the podcast.
Our pleasure. Thanks so much.
Mission-minded touring, unmatched service, institutional knowledge, innovation, experiences, connections, conversations, all wonderful buzzwords that come out of experiences when you go on tours with great tour operators. Now, I promised you a big announcement at the end. If you're thinking about touring, come with me and Alex Gardner as we put together a festival with KA. We're going to Myrtle Beach. It's going to be a few days over a weekend. We'll have things for singers where they'll be in rehearsals. They'll be working with Alex and myself in rehearsals. But then you as the directors get to have sessions with Alex and myself based on our book that is coming out next year. We're so excited. So you get like 3 bangs for your bucks. You get to go to Myrtle Beach, you get to bring your singers to a festival, and you get to have professional development sessions with Alex Gardner and myself. If you're interested, reach out to Brian Clissold. He gave you his contact, Brian, at mykatours.com. But I will link all of those in the show notes. I just want you to start thinking 2023, Myrtle Beach with Emmy and Alex. It will be so much fun. I hope you can do it. Anyway, I hope that you learned about our new sponsor. Every sponsor that comes on the Music Ed Matters podcast aligns with our vision that music ed matters. And in this case, education through performance tours really matters. So in case you have forgotten, you, my friend, you matter. We all know that music matters, especially going on tour. And I'll see you next time.